Hi, I'm Leslie Strong. I am the author of The U Factor and CEO of The Sandbox. Sandbox is a company that accelerates leadership, inclusion, and engagement in organizations. On today's shows, we're going to talk about how the victim mindset keeps diversity from actually happening in your company.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series. I'm your host, Dov Baron. I'm the founder of Full Monty Leadership, and I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything. Let me ask you, what do you need to do to up-level your leadership? Well, today we ask, if you know that we need to build a more diverse workforce, what's holding us up? Well, you'll have to catch this episode to find out. If you're a new listener, new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. You can always find out more about us on one of the Apple podcasts or Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever it is that you tune into podcasts. We always need your help in staying relevant, though. So please get over there, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. You can also catch us on traditional radio stations across the United States every Monday and Thursday, all the way from Colorado to Quantico. And you can also look for us on Roku TV, where there's over 100,000 subscribers. If you're a regular listener, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners, with a potential reach of 2.5 to 4 million listeners for every single show. We are honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. Again, I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. As a leader, whether you're a CEO, someone in the C-suite, a sales leader, entrepreneur, or leader in any capacity, you know that not only is there a need, but in most organizations, there's actually a mandate for greater diversity. Now, in fairness, if you're an old school leader or if you were brought into leadership through the old model, you may be struggling to make sense of this whole diversity thing. However, just for a moment, I want you to imagine that you are a woman who's had to deal with misogynistic behavior her whole career. Or consider this. What if you're a person of color who's had to deal with racism, whether it's subtle or direct, your whole career? Or maybe you are what's known now as a non-binary individual who's sick to death of those funny looks or awkward silences in the elevator. Maybe now you can see that this mandate for diversity is at least stalled. So how do we successfully accelerate forward while in the process elevating the way that we lead? What if we could gamify the process of diversity? Well, stay tuned, because our guest on this episode is Leslie Strong. Leslie is an internationally known author, speaker on reclaiming personal power. She is the CEO of Sandbox, which is a sponsorship technology. We'll explain what that is in a minute, that accelerates leadership development and advancement. Leslie is a personal and executive leadership coach who motivates and inspires others to identify, reframe, and ultimately transform their personal and professional lives. With her partner, Greg Ducoka, I think I got that right, they have created a sponsorship technology for developing leadership in organizations. Leslie is committed to all people being heard, seen, and valued. Leslie is also the author of a brand new book called The U Factor. Leslie Strong's The U Factor marries the tenets of Gretchen Rubin's The Happiness Project with the practical business advice of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. The U Factor offers a wealth of good practical advice for a workforce in transition. She has been featured on Breakfast Television, Toronto, Daytime, the Huffington Post, City Center Mirror, and on other radio programs across the country. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome the Queen of the Sandbox, Leslie Strong. Welcome, Leslie.
Thank you. That's quite an introduction.
Well, you deserve it. You definitely deserve it.
Queen of the Sandbox.
Yeah, you can now claim that. It's on your business card.
All right,
Queen
it
of
is
the Sandbox.
That's exactly
Double X Sandbox. So let's jump into a place I like to start with all my guests, which is, we're all super connected these days, and we have people we look up to and we're inspired by. But I think that oftentimes the people I know who are really great leaders were usually inspired by somebody that we wouldn't necessarily expect, somebody we maybe don't even know. Who has been someone who's been a major influence, a major inspiration to you and potentially your leadership?
Well, I can't say it's someone I don't know or anyone doesn't know. I think one of my my biggest inspiration has always been an Oprah Winfrey, just because of where she came from in the past and how she was able to maneuver, to succeed in her life, even though she was handed a very tough hand of cards at the beginning of her life. And she overcame it, and then she was committed to making other people's lives also great and seeing where they could get past their own barriers, just like she did. And so I just love her commitment to people and people's value, and them just always feeling like they're enough.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've named Oprah as one of my top 10 as well over the years, and one of the reasons is because you hear backstories from all kinds of people about all kinds of people. But the thing about her, as you said, she was not handed an easy, life. I mean, born in abject poverty, wore a potato sack as a dress, was sexually molested. Just the list goes on and on and on. But at the same time, there was something she said years ago that is part of my purpose and what I talk about. And I say that when you find your personal purpose, not some BS version of it, not some mission statement version, but your real personal purpose, when you find that, it's kind of difficult to say. And the reason it's difficult to say is because it's way bigger than you. And it feels kind of egoic to say it because, you think that people will look at you. And I know that Oprah said hers, and I know that people have looked at her that way. And what I say is that when you're really connected to your purpose, it's way bigger than you. It's as big as the world, and it feels bad to say it. And Oprah said, even as a little girl, she knew there was something great within her. So, you imagine growing up in that incredible poverty and violence and all the things that she grew up with, but somehow something in her, she knew that. And many people go, oh, well, that's egoic. Meanwhile, they're going to their 9-to-5 jobs, miserable as all hell. Right. And she's going to work, loving what she does and making a difference in the world. And I'm not judging anybody for what they're doing. That's their choice. But my point is this, the inspiration for me with Oprah is this desire to do something that is bigger than her, that she felt that seed planted within her at some soulful level. And that's very inspiring for me. So thank you for sharing that.
That is.
And thank you for giving me the opportunity to actually say, that how she's inspired me too. So it's cool.
Right.
Very
awesome.
Cool. Thank you. Now, you and your partner, Greg, have created a sponsorship technology for developing leadership in organizations. So the first thing we want to do is get this definition of, you and I talked about this before when we spoke almost a year ago now, about the sponsorship model, sponsorship culture, because it sounds like, this program is brought to you by,
right.
And that's not what you're talking about.
No.
So tell us a little bit about what it means.
So sponsorship is really an advanced form of mentorship. So mentorship is when a leader is developing somebody, and it may not even be a difference of levels from a hierarchy perspective in an organization, but a mentor will help and guide somebody in their development process. It is a one-way relationship. Sponsorship, on the other hand, it is like mentorship where two people will come together. Typically, it is a bit more of a hierarchical relationship, and the sponsor will advocate and champion as well as develop the individual. So there's somebody who will take their name and their resume to the table where they otherwise may not have that opportunity. It's also a two-way relationship where it's imperative that the sponsoree, as we call them, is as responsible for that relationship. Because if they're going to ask somebody to put their corporate capital,
sure,
their reputation on the line for them, well, that sponsoree better be, doing their side of the game by doing what they need to do to excel and develop and be the person who deserves that. And so it really becomes a two-way. The other great part of sponsorship is that the leader gets to really develop their own leadership skills, and they get to see what's going on in the organization at different levels. So if there's a two-level difference between the sponsor and the sponsoree, the sponsor really gets to see what's going on at that lower level that they may not otherwise know anything about. So it really is a great two-way relationship. And then emotionally, why we decided to go the sponsorship route is because for the sponsoree, when somebody is advocating and championing for you and really out for you, you really feel like you belong in the organization. You care that you care that they're investing in you. You're cared about. And with that comes engagement. And what we all know is when you're engaged, you're more productive. The company's better, everything works, and the bottom line is increasing. So it really is such a great, all-encompassing way beyond mentorship for excelling.
Well, the interesting thing I like about it is that there's a level of personal responsibility to it, that it's not just passive, it seems like you have to constantly reassess whether you are earning that position of being sponsored by the other person. And the way you're doing it in this platform is that sponsorship exclusive to inside the organization, or can somebody sponsor somebody who is, because oftentimes in mentorship, I'm mentoring somebody in another industry or certainly in another company. Is that the same here?
No, for us with our technology, it is within the organization. And sponsorship, because somebody is advocating and championing for you, really they're doing it so that you can advance. So you basically have to be in the same organization for that to work. And the way our app works, it is for an organization to develop and advance employees within that organization. And it creates engagement within that organization.
So it's very much an internal thing and an engagement generator, because we all know that people are more engaged when they feel like they belong, and they feel like they belong when they feel like they matter.
Right.
And so somebody fighting for you, sponsoring you, but at the same time being held accountable to, are you doing what it takes to step into this and deserve this, is vitally important. Now,
absolutely.
There's a lot of research showing that many diversity programs they don't work. I mean, we've talked about this on the show before. That we can go into all kinds of reasons why. One of the things you and I talked about last time was this: it becomes like a corporate ghetto mentality, and that people sort of clump around, and meaning that all the people of this gender, race, whatever the diversity might have been, actually become little pogroms of not diversity at all. So we may have a quote diverse culture, but what we've actually got is these ghettos, these cliques of culture. Talk to us about how that works with what it is you're doing, and how you look to sort of tear down the walls of the ghetto.
Ghetto is an interesting word. So yes. So what we do is, because we've put a technology, to this process, this sponsorship and mentorship, if that's what a company wants to use. And the reason we've done it this way is because typically what happens at this point is there's two ways that sponsorship works in an organization currently. And one is that a senior leader will go and handpick. And so when they handpick, they're handpicking someone just like them, which is how we typically get that white male who's moving up the ranks. And they pick them through networks, but all the networks, as you say, they're all playing in that same ghetto, right? And so other people aren't being seen. The other way to get a sponsor is to go ask for one. Well, you are really going to, so the stat that just came out is 70% of women are uncomfortable asking for a sponsor or mentor. Yeah. Because there are so many things about women, and it's paradoxical, because it's the exact reason why women and underrepresented groups need a sponsor, is for the same reason they're actually really uncomfortable going to get one. You know, we don't throw our hat in the ring. We don't like to be competitive, too egotistical. And mainly, if we think that we'd like some sort of advancement or promotion, well, we have to tick off all the boxes. Like if we don't feel like we're 100% ready, we don't go there, which is what a sponsor can say, well, here, you're actually ready, even though you don't think you are. Right. And so the app, putting a technology to this, we have found that we've taken out up until the very end where the app actually allows you to pick your own sponsor, but it only gives you a couple of selections. It actually takes unconscious bias out. You don't know the gender of the person. You don't know the name of the person. Not until the very end.
You say you get a couple of people to choose. Let's say, I'm making up a number because I don't know, but let's say you get 3 or 4 people to choose from.
Yes.
So if I'm that person, so I don't know the gender of that person.
You won't know the gender. You may, and if there's no photo, you won't even know what they look like, and you may not. And depending on the company, is whether we put the names in or not, or whether we just put a letter and a last name, or you. And you know, we have an area you can add a photo, but most companies don't want photos, so you wouldn't even know. Right, because I mean, if your name is Zahid, as an example, right, we know that's going to be a person, likely to be a person of color. Right. If your name is Leslie, you might be male, you might be female, depending on the spelling. Right. So you know, all those things are these pretty obvious clues. Yes. To, you know, who this is. So I'm feeling more comfortable with a woman, and this is a Leslie with an IE. Or it's probably a woman. You know, or this is, you know, I feel better with somebody of my own race, and Ahmed is there, and you know, it's a pretty cool. I can easily bet that, you know, this is going to be there. So that's what I liked about this when we talked about it, was that hold on a second, that unconscious bias, as you said, the old white guy who mentors the new white guy who will become the new old white guy over time. So it gets that pushed away. And I really liked what that was doing. So if you're doing that, how is that, first of all, I guess, how is it being brought in to organizations? Because you and I talked about this before. People are not really good at embracing change. And so, you know, this is going to be something different. So, yeah, it seems like a good idea, and then 50 pieces of nonsense reasons why. So what's bringing this forward so that people will embrace it despite their own resistance? Right. Well, you know, now is a real push to the employee, right? You know, corporations are finally understanding that their people are everything, right? It's their best asset. Right. And there's just a real push to give people what they need. I mean, you've got the Googles of the world who have come in and provided the millennials with pool tables and ping pong tables and fridges of beer. And so companies have had to go, oh my gosh, I guess we have to start doing something to make people not only happy, but to attract. Yes. And, you know, in a couple of years, the working force is going to be 50% millennials. And it's going to be 75, you know, probably in about 5 years.
In a very short period of time.
A very short period of time. So companies know that in order to attract them, they they really need to cater to what they want. And in order to
Yes.
keep them, because millennials leave every year and a half, in order to retain them, they really have to up their game.
Right.
And the one thing that millennials want is they want a career path, and they want to know where they're going, and they want a sponsor. Because they aren't willing to wait and say, oh, well, in 5 years, I might get to the next level. They're like, where's my next level? When's it happening? Who's going to get me there? They'll call the CEO. You and I would have never called the CEO. They'll call the CEO. They'll get them on LinkedIn, and they'll do whatever to get where they want to go. And so it's becoming almost mandatory that companies need to work with different technology and with different forms of engagement and advancement for people, because they want it yesterday.
Right.
And change is happening so quickly that companies are having a hard time keeping up. So technology is the way that the millennials, A, want to work, and B, it's the only way to keep up with change as much as you possibly can keep up with the level of change.
So you brought up something there, which was what's mandatory. So there are people now, whether we agree with them or not, it's still a fact that they see this mandate around diversity as oppressive. And one could easily argue that you can't effectively mandate secularism, or for that matter, acceptance of another race or religion or even sexual orientation. Talk to us about dealing with that, and in the context of your organization, what you do, but also in a very broad sense of, how do we deal with this?
Yeah, it's
I mean, we can wait for the old people to die, but
but there's more than that, because it's still, there's a societal way of how corporations work,
Yes.
and very patriarchal still, whether we like it or not. And the patriarchy doesn't mean it's easy for men. I mean, the patriarchy has its own challenges for men, for women, for everybody.
Absolutely.
So I just want to make sure I'm not male bashing here or anything.
No, because I'm a guy, and I would say the same thing. I mean, I believe that I actually wrote a lot on this years ago and said, I believe that the white male system, which is the patriarchal system, is most damaging to men.
Oh, yes.
Right? It's horrendously damaging to men. And I say that as a very masculine looking guy, and I know how oppressive it is to men. So yeah, I don't see this as male bashing at all. Please continue.
Okay. And so when the more we try to, I think, look at diversity and try to do the right thing, as you said, the more we create these silos or these ghettos get created. And so it's kind of backfiring on one level. Right. And everyone has a lot of fatigue. There's a lot of the gender fatigue of advancing women and why not men. And, I'm a firm believer that that society has, I guess, what Carl Jung would call the shadow side, the things that we do not want to admit. We want to keep them buried. We want to repress these different ways. And we have to, in order for that patriarchal way to continue. And so, women, we come out of the womb like undervalued because there's gender, or there's the gap, the wage gap. We just come out undervalued. And so, and then you think of underrepresented groups, different minority groups, they've got the gender plus, right? So then their value. And so then we start to fight against it in ways that actually don't work to keep us all together, but they work to blame the other person.
Yeah.
And so I think organizations are so stuck because they actually don't know how to get out of their own way and figure this out. And we're all in these different silos trying to yell and scream, we'll do it my way, we'll do it my way, we'll do it my way. And so what we loved about putting this technology to it, or even sponsorship, whether you put a technology to it or not, as one way, is really just about seeing a human being for who they are and having them be seen, heard, and valued in an organization. And whether they're going to advance the next level or not, they have somebody who cares about them. And then there's a network that gets broadened, right, through that as well. And it's just kind of broadening the scope of who people are talking to in an organization, where they are, who they are, and trying to keep them as individuals instead of a silo or a ghetto or
Yeah.
a type.
Yeah, I mean, I just see this. The challenge with it is that, I mean, I'm very much, I'll be upfront, I'm very much in favor of diversity and bringing all those things in, and we know the research is there that
Yeah.
cognitive diversity helps businesses grow, right? So there's no doubt about that.
Mm-hmm.
But in many ways, a lot of this call for diversity has come out of, or maybe one might even say, has fed a victim mentality on both sides. You know, we're women, we're the victims of the white male system. We're gay, we're victims of the straight system. We're transgender, we're victims of that we don't fit in with anybody. We're men, and we're victims of now there's women's rights and reverse. You know, I mean, it goes on and on and on. And in your book, you talked about this, which I really thought was great. You talked in the U Factor, you talked about looking at the victim mentality, and in many ways, it seems to me like this whole thing around diversity feeds that, because it creates an us versus them. We have to see them in order to integrate them, but the moment we see them, they are different than us.
Yeah.
Right. So talk to us about what you wrote about that in the book and how you helped us to deal with this victim mentality, which is, for me, it's pervasive. I mean, it just seems to be all over the show.
Right. Well, you know, and we all, it's so much easier to be a victim because then we aren't responsible, right? It's all about them. Yeah. And really it's about, you know, looking in the mirror. And typically what we are uncomfortable with in other people is what we're uncomfortable in ourselves. Absolutely. So, you know, and I think this whole like female sexuality, if I use an example, men are uncomfortable. You know, men try to have the power around women's sexuality because there's a discomfort. And you know what? It's as much as women, we're uncomfortable with our own sexuality, so nobody's going to be comfortable because we don't know if our shirt should be done to here. And if they are, then we're a prude. And if they're done to here, then we're a bit of, you know, then we're something else. We're a bit of a slut. So we don't know what to do. We don't know what the rules are. And so then if we don't know, then who does? And so then everybody's uncomfortable. And then that puts us in the victim of saying, well, I can't do this because of. Right. And so really it's about looking in the mirror and being really comfortable with yourself and knowing who are you and how am I going to take responsibility for my life? And once we can start with ourselves, then we can move out to the rest of the world. But it's very hard to try to do things and make a difference in the world if we don't even know who we are, because then we don't necessarily come from authenticity. And authenticity is all about the truth. If you don't know the truth, you can't be authentic, right? And so really it's taking responsibility for what we say, what we believe in, and who we are, and then what are we going to do with that out in the world. But it really starts with yourself and knowing knowing who you are, what you say, what your perspectives. You really want to challenge your own perspectives, your own belief systems, and look at them and say, are they the truth, or are they just my truth, or are they not the truth at all, and are they a truth someone gave me a long time ago? Yeah. You know,
you and I talked about that last time, which is, you know, I think that until there is a personal responsibility for our own development, our own growth, I think it's always going to be stalled. But having been doing what I do for 35 years, I can tell you that without a shadow of a doubt, and I'm an optimistic guy and I'm very positive and I love people and believe in growth and development, but I also understand that people are resistant to growth and development. I got it. Yep. So it's one thing to say it starts with self. It's one thing to say, look at shadow work. You know, I do that work privately with high-level leaders, but I can tell you that, you know, most people are not going to go there because, as you said, it's way easier to go, those bastards are doing this to me, right? And so I'm really interested to know how you're dealing with that inside of this diversity model, because I love that you're not letting people see who it is. But then, okay, let's pretend I'm Whitey, who is a little, leaning a little over to the right. Maybe not quite falling over to the right, but leaning that way. And, you've set me up with Mohammed or whoever it is, right? Who is not white, or who is maybe a gay, not white woman.
Right.
And meanwhile, I've got to go and buy myself a packet of Depends. How do we deal with that? That's what I'm trying to understand. Right. What is the strategy for, because I'm sure there are many people listening here who do feel like they're victims on either side of that scale.
Yep.
Who would like to, maybe, they are a little open-minded to the idea of development, but it's not really them that's the problem. But they'd like to find a solution to this. And maybe that's the leader who's saying, I can see that in my company. Walk us through a little bit about how to directly deal with that, if you don't mind, please.
Yeah, it's tough because, as we said before, diversity training does not work. For one thing, right. People are making somebody go and listen to something that, in essence, they don't think applies to them, or I know it all, or whatever. Because it's usually so based, and it tippy toes, right? Because we don't want to offend anybody. And so it doesn't actually do the job. So companies spend a lot of money doing nothing. And if you were matched with, let's say, somebody who was a different color, race, gender, or whatever it might be, I think at the one personal level, there is the question to ask yourself is, do I want to advance, and do I want to be working in this great company? Or do I want to sit here and just not accept and not listen and not change? People don't want to change, and our app isn't going to make people change. I'm not going to make people change. People have to decide to change. And so it really is, it's something that the organization, it's a trickle down effect, I believe. If the organization really starts at the top and says, all right, we all are in this together, and we're all going to make mistakes. And what we're going to do, though, is we're going to sit and we're going to listen, and we're going to try to step in somebody else's shoes. We're going to spend a day in another person's shoes who's not like us at all.
Right.
The one thing that PwC, they have a sponsorship program, and what they always match a woman. They don't match. The sponsorees go find a sponsor, but they only match with men. The women, and it's for women advancement. And they do this so that the males will start to understand what it's like to be a female leader, a female in the organization, and what challenges that represents, and what are the opportunities. And so it really is about expanding and trying to stand in someone else's shoes and understand it from their perspective.
Yeah.
And just because you may have 5 people the same color does not also mean that their perspectives are the same, right? We can't do that either. And not all women are the same. Not all men are the same. Not all millennials are the same. We like to brush them, but we can't. And so it really is just about stopping and listening. And, our fears about other people are our own fears. It's our own discomfort.
Absolutely.
It's like, I don't know, and part of it is, I don't want to offend you. What if I say something offensive? How many times I've stuck my foot in my mouth? And
but that's the fear, isn't it, Leslie? I mean, this is what I'm saying about, I think that in many ways this is a new land altogether, and people are terrified to offend people. I have friends who've said to me, maybe you shouldn't be so huggy with people. And I'm like, that's who I am. I am a huggy person. I'm always going to hug people. And it's not that I don't care. I do care deeply, but I'm not going to have my personality dictated by another personality. Right. I might now take the moment to ask permission that I might not have asked permission before. I might just giving them a hug, and now I say, can I give you a hug? I do that. And is that a bad thing? No. Does it feel a little bit of a a pinch on my personality. It does, but I can live with that if it makes
Right.
me a better human being, because I want to be a better human being. But when we get things like, you and I are in Canada, we got things like Bill C-16, which I'm sure you're aware of, which is this whole thing around the language patterns that we're allowed to use, and
Yes.
how we have to, by law, refer to people by certain pronouns, as opposed to actually having a conversation. And I think that very often, when we try to mandate legally, and this is what I like about what you're doing, is it's not a mandate to do something legally, but rather a lubricant for these conversations, a lubricant that allows people to slide together and find out more, as you said, to be empathetic, to walk a mile in the moccasins, as one would say.
Yes.
So I just, my concern with it was, and I really want to make sure that people understand this, is that this is not like Prop C-16. This is not saying this is what you have to do and this is the law. This is rather giving people an opportunity to not even really even notice that they're confronting their own shadow, their own discomfort.
Right.
Is that a fair way to put it?
Yes. Yes. And,
Right.
the interesting thing about the app is it can be used for so many things, because it could be used just as a company who wants to embrace diversity by just buddying up people of different cultures, people of different genders, people of different sexual preferences, to
Right.
see what is it like to live a day in your shoes. What if I'm like, for 3 months, you and I are buddies, and I have to learn about you and you have to learn about me? And what is that like? And if you have an
Right.
entire company doing that, like, wow, right? That's worth its weight in gold. And then sometimes it's for advancement and having different people in different roles. But yeah, it's really, I love that word lubricant. It's very cute. It's a great way to say it. It is. It's a way to just not mandate, but allow people to meet, sometimes even under the guise of advancement or development or diversity, but it is bringing people together who are just hopefully different.
Yeah, I really like that about it. So let's talk about this in the context of corporate social responsibility, which is, we're all hearing a lot more about. If it's not a mandate, it's certainly a social pressure, because the customer, whatever the form the customer might take, is now asking for that. Some of the great social responsibility companies are really leading the way on this. It's fantastic. I mean, Plastic Bank, which is actually based out of Canada again, with David Katz, who's been a guest on our show. Huge social corporate social responsibility. How do you feel like this plays into that? Is it something that you think is like, definitely needed? We must ask for this, or is it something separate for you? What's your thoughts?
Well, I think where it goes hand in hand with social responsibility is it really is a way, it is, because it's known, sponsorship is known as the best way to advance women and underrepresented groups.
Yeah.
Then it means that a company is actually doing their due diligence, right? They're doing something about helping people move, to advance, to develop in a way that they may not otherwise get to do that by offering them sponsors. So it definitely is, and a lot of companies love that, and clients love it, because it means that the company's taking it seriously. Right.
Yeah,
And people know that this whole training is such lip service. And so many companies do have lip service to this. They say, oh, yes, we're doing it. And they aren't. And it's like, well, what are you doing? Oh, well, we have a little program over here. But to really engage, and this is what we love about the whole culture of sponsorship, is really creating a culture where people have access to somebody in the organization where they know what their career path is, they know how to develop, they know where they're going, they know what they're doing, so they belong, they're heard, and it's not mandated on anything other than them as individuals.
Right.
And so it isn't becomes no, there's not lip service that way. People are actually doing something and shifting the conversation, shifting the networks around in the organization. So I think there's just, unfortunately, there's just so much room for that lip service. And that's why you do have to have companies who have to be cognizant about social responsibility, because it's so easy to just say one thing and not do anything about it.
Well, I think we see way too much of that.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
From your point of view, because you're out in the world with this, and you're speaking about this, you've got a company based on this. From your point of view, why aren't more companies simply utilizing sponsorship when, as you said, the research depicts that it's the most effective way to advance not only women, but people in different social groups or racial groups or whatever it is? Why do you think that why do you think companies aren't utilizing sponsorship more? Why, we've done the mentorship thing. Why isn't this?
Yeah. Well, for one, it's a fairly new concept. The other thing is, for HR to start matching individuals together, that is a lot of work. It's a lot of manpower. It's a lot of logistics. There's a lot of unconscious bias that goes into that, because who am I to think that two people should be matched? But it's a lot of manpower for somebody. The other side of it is a lot of companies will dictate, it won't be a formal program, but they'll say, if you want a sponsor, go get one. Like, this is what they say to women all the time. Well, it's great. Go get one. And a woman is sitting there just going, what if I get rejected? What if I'm not the person they want? What if I don't have the qualifications? What if it makes me look arrogant or competitive, or what are other people going to think? There's just so many things that go on in our heads.
Of course.
And underrepresented groups are going to be the same. Like, I'm not a white guy. They're not going to put me to the top. I'm never going to become a VP. So we all have these sort of already belief systems. And
on the other side, the white guy might be going, oh, nobody's going to want to work with me because I'm a white guy.
I don't fit the criteria anymore.
No, because I'm viewed as privileged, so nobody's going to want to sponsor me.
Right. They have to pick somebody of a different race, color.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And so people aren't just going and getting a sponsor. And so what companies are left with is a very logistically intensive way to bring a program about. And when you have companies of thousands of people, how do you do that? Yeah. Without hiring a lot of people to help that happen. So this is, again, why we've said, well, let's put a technology to this so that it's scalable and it's measurable, and thousands of people can go on it very easily. And it is not labor intensive at all for the companies. And we do all the heavy lifting anyway. So, and then we can measure the stats and see what's happening. But it is a hard one to implement because of the way it is, what has to happen, right, to get two people together.
Obviously, as you said, the manpower side of it would be a big drain on resources, and having a software company who can handle that for you would be of extraordinary value.
Right.
What do you think is the most misunderstood? What's the most common misunderstanding about what you guys are doing? What do you think that people think it is that it's not? Because that's always a challenge,
Yeah. Well, people think it's mentorship, for one. And people think that, at the end of the day, we always say it's like a dating app for companies. But companies don't really understand necessarily why do they need it, and so they still want to put it in for small groups. So they'll say, oh, well, maybe just our high potentials will match up. And so companies aren't seeing the broadness of what the potential is of actually having an entire company have a sponsor, or most of the company having a sponsor, and what it could do for engagement. And so they're still thinking in silos
let's think in silos about how we can break down the silos.
Exactly. Exactly.
Let's only talk to the white guys about women's rights. Yes, that's a good idea.
It's a perfect idea. And so, yeah, and so, but basically they still think it's mentorship because people don't know actually what sponsorship is and how it is different and why it works better. And why
so who is there some companies out there that are really exemplary at this, that, really showing us, they're really stepping up into this, and whether it's with your software or in any other form, who are really embracing this diversity and the sponsorship model of diversity?
Well, it's interesting. I was on a call yesterday for, I'm on a panel for a Women in Tech conference next week. And that question came up, and nobody on that panel could give us an example. What I do know is I know that PricewaterhouseCoopers has a very successful program for their women, but they're very high level executive women, and the women have to go pick their sponsor. But they do a lot of work to really give them a lot of support around that. So I would say that's awesome. We know that people are working with us like TELUS and Rexall. They're actually trying to expand it throughout their companies, throughout the entire companies, and they're seeing so many different ways to use this. And so, we're just in pilot phase with them, walking them through so we can see what do you need and how do we make it specific for you. But they're really, they're taking the bull by the horns, and they're like, okay, let's disrupt this whole thing and do it differently. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Now you've like I said, you're an author, you have this company, you've been doing this great work. And as I always like to say to people, leaders are growers, meaning that they're committed to their growth and their development, and which means that they're on a journey. They're on a journey that you think they've arrived at, that they don't think they've arrived at, because they understand it's an evolution.
Right.
But one of the things I like to ask people is, what was one of the things that you did maybe for a long time that you thought was a good thing? Maybe you thought it was going to help you, but it actually blocked you from success.
Caring what other people thought and doing what other people thought I should do. I kept thinking that everybody else had the answers better than me. I kept thinking, oh, well, I know that I think this way, but you're at a higher level than I am, or you're smarter, or you're a man, or you're my mother, or
there's mansplaining and then there's momsplaining.
Exactly. And so somehow I just kept listening to everybody else but me. And and then it was at the time, in my development, and like this is where some of my book came from as well, as I had to stop and just go inside and say, I actually know more about me than anybody, because I'm me, and what does work for me and what doesn't. And so it's great to ask other people, but it's not taking exactly what they say and going with it. You have to put it through your own filter system and say, well, where does that stand? And that's a really great piece of advice. And how does it work or doesn't it work, and how would I implement it or not implement it? But it has to come from your own truth and telling yourself the truth.
And oftentimes these things are brought about, the realization of them. I think they're inherently happening and we don't even notice until we do, and then we notice. So what was the turning point for you in your life, in your leadership, in your business philosophy? What sort of made you realize things are going to change?
Well, I've had a couple of really, like when I first started into the gender differences area, and I was all about helping women, and I just really wanted to take that by storm. And I was in my 20s, and I was running a workshop with a woman I was learning from. She was sort of my mentor sponsor at the time.
Right.
And we were with a very large company, and I was at the flip chart, and I was writing, and somebody called me Vanna White. And not only did I die inside, But the fact is, the woman I was working with did not even say anything. So she didn't stand up for me, and she didn't come to she didn't even put it out in the room like, this is what we're here about. We're here to talk about why women are challenged at work, and why there's the gender difference is so important. And yet she allowed someone to call me Vanna White. And in that moment, I just thought, I just felt like a woman disrespected, undervalued. And I actually let that get to the core of me. And it really held me back for a while. And then I did another workshop at another point many years later. And I got very different feedback. And I was like, okay, thank goodness the Vanna's gone. But it took a long time for me to come out of that and readdress it's not about what's on the outside, it's about what's on the inside. And that was more about them than it was about me. And if I'm going to be a tall, blonde, thin woman in business, I'm just going to have to figure out how to accept it and work with it, because this isn't changing. Like, I'm not going to go gain 50 pounds just so people are more comfortable with me, or dye my hair dark, or, whatever. I just had to start living with who I was on the outside and just making it okay on the inside.
But right there, we could have started there and had a whole show just on that, because there's so much to unpack in there.
Oh my God.
Because here you are. I mean, as you said, you're talking about gender issues, and somebody uses a gender statement at you, which is disrespectful, and and what's more is you're facilitating it with another woman who is supposed to be your senior, who doesn't even address it or directed it, so we get that, even the people speaking about it are not living it. I mean, for me, the massive incongruence, the lack of integrity, even in being there, for whatever her reasons were, and I'm not judging her on it, just like, like, wow, right there in and of itself. And then you brought out another piece, which is this wanting to belong, wanting to be included, wanting to be part of, and yet knowing that this is your physicality. This is who you are. There's a wonderful series on YouTube that are actually short shows, and it's called Omletto. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's very good. And they're like 10-minute video stories. They're brilliant. And they're, professionally done and all the rest of it. They usually love stories, but not always. And one of them is a guy living in New York who is a Sikh guy with a turban on, and he's living in New York, and 9/11 happens. And all the looks he gets and all the judgments he gets at him that next day, right? And then on a Sunday, he has a barbecue at his house, and his friends come over, and his friends are white and black and they're mixed race and, all different kinds. And they say, and one of the guys is on the barbecue, and he goes, "Oh, sorry. I put the pork sausages next to the beef sausages." He goes, "I'm Sikh. I eat pork." And he goes, "Oh, okay, sorry." And he goes, "That's the Muslims." He goes, "Oh, okay." And then he says, he goes, "Oh, but can you have the beef? Because I know you guys don't have that." He goes, "That's a Hindu. That's not Sikh." And so, you can feel this tension within the man. It's brilliantly done. You feel the tension within the man. And meanwhile, in another shot, his wife's having a conversation with one of her friends, and her friend is saying how beautiful his eyes are. And she says, "What's his hair like under the turban?" And she says, "Well, he doesn't wear the turban at home. He has very beautiful, thick, black, curly hair, and it's absolutely gorgeous." And then the next scene is you see how all this has gotten to him, and he's in the bathroom, and he cuts off his hair.
Oh.
And the next day, he's on the subway going to work in New York City. And the day before, after 9/11, people were moving away from him because he had a turban on. And this day, now he's cut his hair off, people look at him and they move away from him because it's the color of his skin. The turban's gone, but it's the color of his skin.
Right.
And I thought it was like so powerful because it was such a wonderful example of there has to come a point where you say, listen, you might not be comfortable, but this is who I am. In that moment, of being called Vanna White because you're a tall, slim, woman with blonde hair is a fact of who you are.
Yep.
And you can like it or not like it. And I think that that's a lot of where us men, particularly white men, have got to get to. You know, I'm not going to walk around with white man shame. I'm not going to do that.
Right.
Do I think white men have been shit on society? I do. And I'll hold up that. And I'm
Right.
fully support that. And we've done some terrible things. However, I'm not responsible for all those, but I can be responsible for myself right now, moving forward. Have I been misogynistic? Without a shadow of a doubt. Have I probably said racist things? I'm certain I have, even though I don't have recollection of it. I'm certain I've done all the things that are bad, but I can take responsibility for me now moving forward and how I move forward, but understanding that I'm not going to suddenly change skin color.
Right.
And I really love that the way you said that, Leslie. I love that you brought that home with it came to a place of you owning you, which is why I love the title of your book. It's just you owning you.
Yeah.
And that is, I think for me, it's my piece around this is that's what diversity is. It's cognitive diversity. It's understanding that I'm me. I'm not you. There is a diversity between us. Even if we're identical twins and we look exactly the same, there is a diversity there. And rather than making that the big deal, let's just make that as the fact. Right? Because right now, that's what I said, we're on this brink, and it seems like it's the big deal. But what if it's not the big deal? What if it's just the fact? Then does the big deal go away? And I think it would. I'd love your thoughts on that as we come to our end of the show.
Well, yeah, it's, you know, the big deal is what we make it. We're the ones who make it a big deal. And what if it's not a big deal? You know, I have to say, my daughter was going out shopping at the mall. I have teenage daughters, and one of my daughters was going to shopping at the mall, and she had this, it was a couple of months ago, and she had this little top on and this little outfit on, and I was like, ugh, what are you doing? You can't walk out of the house like that. You can't go to a mall like that. And she said, well, why? I said, because there's boys there, there's men there, and some of them are creepy, and they're going to steal you and put you in the sex slave thing. And she's just looked at me and she goes, why do I have to be responsible for their hard-ons?
Oh, I love
it. And I just went, I literally I was dumbfounded because it was such a brilliant response. She's like, and it is, she goes, you know, I just need to be me. And I can't be responsible for what everybody else thinks and how everyone else feels and what their hormones are doing. She goes, I can only be responsible for me. And I was just like, yes. And, you know, but as a mother, I'm like, but.
Yeah,
it was such a good point. It was just such a brilliant point. And that's coming from a teenage girl, you know?
Yeah, and I really, you know, whatever people say, I am more hopeful at that level of millennials and Gen Z / the global generation because of that, because they are less stringent about the labels. You know, it's they don't call themselves gay or straight a lot of the time. They're like, yeah, I'm just me. Right. Yeah. There's a wonderful show on TV called Atypical that you may be familiar with about an autistic young man and his sister who is dating a guy, and she's in love with a guy, and then she meets a girl and she has a thing with the girl, and it's like, but never once does she say I'm straight or I'm gay.
Right.
She's just her experiencing her life, and we can morally judge that. We just as we can morally judge the teenage girl in a miniskirt, but the truth of the matter is we have to take responsibility for our own lives and our own reactions. And, you know, I think if you're a woman, and it's, again, this might sound misogynistic, if you're a woman and you go out in a low-cut top and your boobs are all pushed up, guys are going to look.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you think they're not going to look and you think they'd be better men not to look, then you are ignoring biology. That's just a fact.
You also
and it's okay. I'm not saying that it's all right for guys to do it. I'm just saying it's going to be nature. It's just going to happen. And if you don't like it, then wear a polo neck. I mean, that's fine, right? Wear a turtleneck. But at the same time, we all need the personal responsibility of my life. And I'm also interacting with others. So I need to, so that's the balance. It's the ownership and the responsibility.
Yep. Yep. You're responsible for what you also put out there and what you say and how it lands. You know, and I agree. Like, you know, when my kids go out, I'm like, you just got to know that you're not responsible for what they do, but you're responsible for how they're going to look. So you just have to, if you want those looks or you don't want those looks, go accordingly.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
That's
and you have to be responsible for what comes out of your mouth too. It's like, you can't just say what you want. You have to actually have some filters and have some compassion.
Yeah. I mean, you know, people talk about filters, but I just say, you know, it's a very simple filter. It's called compassion.
Yeah.
Like actually not care about what everybody else thinks, but actually give a shit about how people feel. That's vastly different.
And how do you, like, you know, and how do you feel after you've said something terrible to someone? Don't you feel bad?
Exactly.
Like, right. So
unless you are a sociopathic narcissist, you don't care. Yeah. But otherwise, you probably do care. So, Leslie, this has been awesome. Thank you for this great conversation. Yeah. Before we finish off, I just want for you to do two things. First of all, I'm going to ask you to tell our listeners of yours, what's the number one practical piece of advice you want to give them so they can take this very powerful conversation and put it into action? It doesn't matter what it is. Something small would be great.
I mean, I think it's just look in the mirror and really tell yourself the truth and be responsible for how you think, how you feel, and what you say and what you put out in the world. And just know that there's only one you, which means everybody's different than you and nobody else thinks like you. So you want to be thoughtful and mindful of that.
I love it. And please tell our listeners, our viewers, where they can find out more about Leslie Strong and all the wonderful resources that you have and all the things you do.
Well, if you're an organization or an employee who is interested in the Sandbox, it's thesandbox.com. Sandbox has 2 X's, like female chromosomes. And we'd be happy to chat with you about our app and how to get it into your organization. My book is called The You Factor. It's on Amazon, or there's strongcoaching.com is my website, and I am Leslie at strongcoaching.com or Leslie at thesandbox.com. Either one, depending on where you are and what you're looking for, will get you to me. Okay, so we've got strongcoaching.com and the sandbox with a double X.com. Yep.
This has been a pleasure and an honor. Thank you so much for all that you've shared. It was great insights, and I encourage you, dear listener, to make sure that you go over to strongcoaching.com or thesandbox.com and really find out more about all these amazing resources and really look at how you can apply greater diversity into not only your organization, but your thinking. You can hang out with other conscious leaders and chat about this episode or any past episodes in our Facebook groups and our LinkedIn groups by just looking for the Leadership and Loyalty podcast on either of those platforms, and you can chat with other conscious leaders. To find out how you can hire me, Dov Baron, as a speaker or strategist for your organization, simply go to fullmontyleadership.com/consulting or fullmontyleadership.com/speaking. If you're frustrated with investing in the training and development of your talent, only have them leave before you get your ROI, then come talk to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets inside of your organization by tapping into purpose. fullmontyleadership.com, because you can't outsource authenticity. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about how you can embrace greater levels of diversity in your life, your leadership, and your thinking. This is Dov Baron, and I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness, and I am out.